Hello, Jessica.
Hi.
It's a pleasure to be here with us today for the podcast. Um, we've been discussing before, and I really would love for you to explain how did you started with digital art, and later on, what are you working on today?
Sure. So I came to the art world by way of starting in the finance world. So I was in finance for 9 years. Had wanted to get out for a while, but it was always like the next deal, one more deal. And I was diagnosed with cancer. Then went into business consulting, which I loved. I had a great mentor that was really focused on like evolving the whole person. So, like evolving the consciousness and the mindset alongside the business. So, that was really rewarding and was a great kind of stepping stone. But when I was diagnosed, I immediately knew that I needed a full lifestyle change. I had to redesign my life. I mean, I had gone, these extreme levels of stress and anxiety. And, we kind of get desensitized to just how dysfunctional that is. And so the first thing I did was I said, I'm going to take 30 days just off and just do all the things I said I'd never had time to do. And so that was listening to music, going to galleries, sitting on the beach, learning yoga, and, just really immersing myself in the arts. And so one day in meditation, I had this whole download to go into the art business. And it was just this profound moment. And so I had to learn it from the very bottom. I was living in Jacksonville where I grew up, no art, like no culture per se, no cultural infrastructure. And
That's
so,
a different cultural
yeah,
infrastructure.
yes, definitely. And so it started really from the bottom. But what was interesting was I started analyzing like the actual like the art world and looking at, okay, how would I want to contribute? So I immediately knew that I wanted to focus on public facing art. And so, and then also the B2B side, since business was my background. So I knew those two pillars and then just started learning it, started building relationships with artists, had a really great mentor. And I came across digital art on Instagram and was immediately enamored.
Who did you come across?
Rio, Miguel Chevalier. I just started, going down these kind of rabbit holes. Um, Jean Bayuk Berber. I mean, these artists that were creating these meditative spaces, these domes and like immersive spaces. And I could feel for myself, even through the device, that it was like bringing presence and making me feel, just it had a healing aspect to it. So immediately I was like, this is my lane. Because the art world, outside of that was really intimidating without a formal education, without the connections, without being in New York or a major capital. It was daunting to think, how am I going to contribute in a way that I knew, given how I found my way into the art world, that it needed to be something profound that I hoped it would be. And so digital art became my lane.
And what would you say to people who cannot perceive this kind of emotion because they say, "Oh, it's digital art, it's a screen, it's not paint on canvas," because you felt different when you looked at it. So, any insights about helping people to enjoy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, I think, the public, that's why the public work is so important to me and getting it at scale. I mean, at scale, I mean, and now there's a lot of science behind it. I mean, Rafiq just did an incredible published study from his MoMA installation where we were able to not only get the surveys, which, from the very beginning when I started producing exhibitions, I would watch the room. I would watch people not have their phones out. I would watch them exhale, like watch them really be present. And it was so profound to me. And so that's when I realized if we could begin getting data behind this, then we have an opportunity to scale. But I think, when you see it at scale, in a large immersive environment, it's hard not to be moved.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, so like the commercial side of things, B2B, so business to business.
Yep.
Could you explain, let's say, for an artist who is listening to the podcast today, for example, how could they work with you? What would it bring to their practice? What could it mean to their collectors?
Sure. So because when I started working in digital art, it was really just about make the exhibitions real. I mean, I started in 2014. And so back then it was like just find ways to bring the work to life. So it was always through corporate sponsorships. So I would like leverage brands and different businesses, especially healthcare, because given that it was a part of my own healing journey, I definitely saw the value in bringing the work into the healthcare environment. And so we would have these exhibitions. And so then it took me 7 years of talking to these different companies and brands to say, this is the future. The future of the built environment will include digital art, and you should really be looking at this now. And so they would continue to sponsor. And along the way, we started looking at what is a business model that allows them to participate and that really benefits the artist. So from the early days, even when I was producing temporary exhibitions, I would have the production companies I work with sign within the writer that they had to delete the files in front of me because I always could feel that we needed to protect the IP and that these works would be valuable. And, before we had access to blockchain. And so started really studying, what is a new model? And so we knew that we needed to be able to control the distribution, the movement of the works, and that protecting the IP would be pivotal, but also the data component, that if we could be able to prove what was happening and how much the engagement was increased with digital art versus even just traditional physical works. Because no matter how great the work is within the built environment, eventually the same piece just kind of becomes it begins to dissipate the effects of it. Where with digital, we can constantly reinvent the conversation and the space.
And this you can do the metrics you just mentioned because you use a specific technology to kind of give insights to maybe the client and the artist about what's going on. Is
Yep.
it correct?
Yep. So from the beginning, it was about creating a software that, again, we could, control the distribution. But when we started looking at the amount of data that is picked up within a smart building, there's so many metrics, but at the time they were really only being used for sustainability. So we started really analyzing, what can we understand around the human experience? And now post COVID and this, the future of work needing to be so reinvented, people are starting to put sensors in buildings and understand how people move within the space, where are they spending their time, what's capturing their attention. But we also already knew that within the advertising world, that this data is, completely available. Um, and so we started looking at, especially with social media, when I started studying, okay, what are the metrics? What's valuable to understand? And I was pretty shocked to we all know how much data is gathered around us for social media, but the lack of any accountability to actually deliver back a positive experience. More often than not, it's the more you get triggered, the longer you'll stay. So often it's content that they know will create a state of anxiety or frustration that's pumped out to you intentionally. And so we really started looking at, okay, if we could flip that on its head and begin looking at what metrics actually made somebody calm, created a sense of community, like when we see if somebody touches somebody on the shoulder and says, look at this, what do those metrics mean? And how does that define engagement?
So for the artist, I mean, what kind of metric have they found the most useful so far?
Yeah, so it's all pretty early still. So we have, we've been doing it a lot in temporary exhibitions, and now we are starting to get a lot of clients who are looking at have they're reinventing their out of home digital experience. So mostly either integrating art alongside advertising or doing a takeover, or for instance, in Europe, where the pharmaceutical companies are not allowed to advertise products, they're becoming very interested in having digital art in the public spaces and be able to align with, like, say, pharmacies or life science buildings and be able to capture. So right now it's predominantly foot traffic, dwell time, gaze time, and sentiment. So can we tell, do you have a positive expression, a neutral expression, a negative? So those have been used, like I said, in advertising across the board. So we're really looking at, can we get the same, it's easy to get the same metrics usually with, we use cameras we have a great partnership with Sony. And so we use cameras that compute right from the edge. So it's all with anonymity. But we're able to almost, what was inspired it was, this Spotify rap report at
Mhm.
the end of
Oh,
the
yeah.
year, you get this whole culmination of really like what your sentiment was. And so we imagine doing that for artists and on the platform, the more clients that are open to us being able to capture that data, the artist will be able to see how many of their works were licensed, where they were, and what the engagement was.
You know that they did that on object as well, remember? You know, are you familiar with the Tezos?
Hmm.
The Tezos platform object that they did the same annual, oh, you were the third best collector of this art.
Ah, yes, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, on
nice.
the collecting
Yeah.
side of
It's
Yeah.
very interesting, these metrics.
it's a
Yeah.
unique. I've never heard like a platform allowing artists and collectors, to a certain extent, to
Yep.
understand what's going on with their work. And
I
it's
mean, imagine how different the world would be if we just began measuring positive things, you know? I mean, like I said, I was just so shocked when we started realizing how the social algorithms work. And like for instance, the younger audience, we're already seeing the unintended consequences of the depression. And I realized when one of the whistleblowers came forward, they said if a young girl goes through and deletes one of her selfies, she's immediately fed beauty ads because they know you're having a moment of low self-worth.
wow.
And I was like, this is so like, it's just so terrible, the long-term consequences of this. And we know that art is, we've looked at art in, past centuries. Obviously I was really inspired by the Renaissance, but they had such a desire to make their people enlightened and to live in harmony. And they knew that they were needed to make the public realm as beautiful as possible. So I think long term it can make a big difference.
And let's say, like an artist, what kind of advice would you give an artist about what works from a metric standpoint for art in public spaces? I know it's a bit
Yep,
early days, maybe, but you should already have some insights. I'm sure it could be interesting.
definitely. I mean, um, I think that looking at the pace of the movement of a piece, having some complexity to where you really are drawing the viewer in with the movement, the color palettes. I mean, lighter, bright color palettes are very uplifting. Some of the fundamentals we know from color theory, but the movement of the piece we're seeing. Um, the spirals, like, there's a lot of science already around spirals and these kinda infinite and it like fractals, things that are innately wired within us and within the patterns of nature, we seem to be very connected to, and they create long engagement.
And AI versus non-AI content, do you have any metrics about that from an engagement standpoint? Or
Not yet. The one, Rafiq's study, I think, was really powerful. And, it was showing that different parts of the brain that were lighting up. So we have a lot of survey data so far. And Thomas Jefferson University, Lynn Godley, who is an artist and a professor there, I think was one of the pioneers of doing published studies around immersive art. And they found that nature and fractals were very powerful. Um, but okay.
Just to go on Rafik study, what did Rafik study? I mean, he did a mall, he had obviously this MoMA exhibition.
Mhm.
I know one of his big collectors was always promoting the fact that this is there was people look at art for 30 seconds or some sort
Yeah.
of time, and Rafik, it's like 10 times
Outrageous. Yep.
10 times the time that people actually look at his work
Yep.
at the museum compared to all of the Van Goghs or whatever else MoMA has.
I think it was
Exhibit.
27 minutes. I mean,
Yes.
that's
wow.
unbelievable.
So what was the study?
Yeah, so he did a study in partnership with Neuroelectrics that is an EEG cap. And so they brought in 31 participants and got their verbal feelings about how they were feeling experiencing the piece, and then also monitored the brain patterns. And the sections of the brain that were lighting up were the same that are correlated with life satisfaction, motivation, positivity. So all the, most beneficial states that we want to see. So that was pretty exciting. And the more data and science we get behind what we're seeing happen. I mean, I remember with the first time when he showed at Art Tech House in New York years ago, and I would watch the audience and I would sit there and I was like, no one's on their phone. They're present. They're
Yes.
sitting here with their family. Like, this is amazing. And the same thing, I had an exhibition in 2017, and there was a little girl that came and the artist was trying to sit and talk to her about the piece, and her dad said, "Oh, I'm sorry, she doesn't have the attention span, she's autistic." And he was in tears when she was sitting still for 3 minutes. And I was like, and granted, we've had sound frequencies with the pieces, those are really powerful. There's a lot of data behind sound frequencies, So that's one way. We have a library of work that has had 13 years of clinical tests behind it that our artists have access to. So that way we get the immediate like clinical testing that validates those pieces as well.
And the sample size you're going to build up with these public installations is going to be very interesting, much more than the 31 sample size, which is
Yep,
already something. But
exactly.
yeah, the knowledge you're going to accumulate over time is going to be
Yep.
extremely valuable and insightful.
Yep, we're starting partnerships with University of Nebraska Medical Center. They're open to doing joint research. Right now, we have two installations at U Health Hospital here in Miami. Those are really exciting. Their architect slated to have two large LED walls at each location. They're stunning hospitals. I mean, they feel more like hotels. They're really landmarks for the way that the world of healthcare is evolving. And so we have a Benheim piece there that's a generative piece, but which is great because it actually was local placemaking. So we did scans of the Miami Botanical Garden and then had the ibis, which is Miami's mascot, which we actually caught live at the Botanical Garden. So the ibis comes in and out of the piece and it's beautiful. It's a generative piece. It's really stunning and very meditative. People love it.
And you have it's only like viewable, or you can listen. There's, you mentioned sounds just before.
Yep.
I'm asking this. I don't know. I'm thinking about Tibetan monks and kind of the deep chanting they do, or when
Yes.
they play this kind of flute with like bones. I think it
Yep.
is, but it's very deep. But I mean, in your immersive installation, so it's video and sound, or it depends, or
It is.
it is
It's
okay.
both. Yep. So we always we with especially with the hospitals, we always include sound, but most of them we try to have the opportunity to include sound as well.
Wow.
But do you regarding like art in the commercial sense, where you people collect art and speculate on art and NFTs and all that stuff? What is your take on that? Because you're on the very like art as a healing process.
Hmm.
One of your healing process. How do you compare the two?
As far
Because
as
you also are finance
yeah.
person, so you know that side very well. And
Yep.
there's a lot of collectors who collect. I mean, a lot of them obviously do it with passion,
Hmm.
and a lot of them, I would say, even more do it for financial benefits.
Yep. Yeah, I think one of the most exciting things is we try to bring a lot of value to the work by putting it in the public realm. The more we can create a cultural moment around the piece, the more value is there. And I think over the long term, the more we can see the engagement and be able to prove that these pieces are creating high levels of engagement, that will, I think, long term change the trajectory of how we're valuing the works.
Hmm. Did you basically have a gallery yourself and stuff?
You know, I did. I had a small one that was more traditional art when I first started. I've never had one within the digital space. I've debated it, especially, looking at should we have something here in Miami? Being my home base and having the hospitals here, I think bringing clients somewhere where they can really experience what we're talking about firsthand. But it's been hard for me to do that, to make that jump because I love being able to be anywhere whenever I need to. And I think right now it's really about getting the volume of our clients and getting as much digital real estate that we can control as possible. So until we hit certain thresholds with that, I think we'll keep going the way that we are.
So in your art gallery, what do you sell?
Oh my gosh. A lot of abstract expressionism. That was like where I fell in love with art to begin with. I was always inspired by the AbX movement and then the California Light and Space movement, which is like such a natural progression into digital. So I love connecting that story, especially for collectors who are, have obviously there's a lot of preconceived notions around digital after the whole NFT phenomenon. But for me, I was in it so much longer before that, so I was really connecting the dots on the natural progression of just different mediums. So those still really inspire me.
What is your take on NFTs? Do you have NFTs? You still collect NFTs or what's?
Yeah, it's been interesting for me because like I said, I was in the space before that. And then all of a sudden, I felt very much on the outside when everything happened because I wasn't looking at it from that way. I was really looking at, and also my perspective is like what will fit best in the public realm. So what was really exploding was something totally different. And so I felt very much on the outside for years. And it wasn't until fairly recently that we've seen which artists really kind of stand the test of time and what is when the aesthetics that feel very timeless, that I'm starting to feel more like, okay, finding my own way. But it's interesting because it still can be a very siloed community. And I think, looking at, yeah, and it's been, like I said, it's been interesting. I've just had my head down doing the work. I mean, my goal is to build a business and build opportunity that becomes incredibly massive and that is, a truly new model for the art industry.
Yeah, it's still outrageous. I think how many people look at NFTs and they have this preconceived notion of bored apes or whatever was
Mhm.
what was the hype that year, and not understand that digital art or art in general, uh, the NFT means absolutely nothing. It's just a way of transact. Actually, just
Yeah.
follow an NFT as we were walking out.
It's
What?
true.
One of these, one of these.
That's a great one to get.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I had thought for a while, we looked at originally trying to do everything on chain just because that was like the conversation. And so it became very clear very quickly that building this bleeding edge technology was so unnecessary when there's content delivery networks, there's CMS platforms that are completely open source that we could build quickly, easily, and really cost effectively. The other part that we realized is working with enterprise clients, we were never going to get through their firewalls with that kind of technology. And so we built what they were already used to um and it worked out really well. And we still are debating, do we I think the only thing I might be interested in is putting the engagement data on chain and the exhibition history. That way there's this
Because this
lo-
corporate side of things and being on chain is like 180 degrees
yeah.
different. I mean,
They don't care at all. Like, I really thought that, once they were collecting the works, like, it still is a lot of education and trying to build a collector mentality because they look at it as content. And that was one of the big breakthroughs that I realized. So I spent so long figuring out, okay, who controls these displays? So I spent years going to like Infocom and all these display conferences and thinking that all of these display integrators are going to love to have another revenue vertical. They can have rev share in it and they refer us the deals. They didn't care. There was a few content agencies that they were referring things out to, but they're getting six figures for content. And I was like, they don't have any, there's no social currency there. There's no value in the pieces. And so I thought that the enterprise clients would want to hold it as an NFT and have it as as an asset and just not at all. Could not
Wow.
care less about it. I think, like I said, along with right now, we're just still educating on the art aspect of it. And then eventually, still think it'll be years down the road, but hopefully they'll go that direction.
And it's quite rare that we have a guest who was there like in 2014, kind of feeling sidelined, which I can absolutely understand, especially if you start from Instagram. I believe you mentioned at
Yep.
some point where things like literally blew off on Twitter or Discord, or
Yep.
you stayed there, you worked head down, as you
Yep.
mentioned. And I mean, what is your analysis of like what happened since 2014, like maybe the craziness and everything, and now things are changing? So you were there, maybe not that involved in the conversation because you were doing the work.
hmm
What's your take on this kind of past 10 years?
Um,
It's a broad question, but yeah.
yeah, it has been a wild ride. I mean, part of it, I remember, like in 2021, for Art Basel, we partner with Super Rare, who are always great partners to me. And we did the monolith a couple years. And I remember being at this like dinner with them and thinking this feels like what it must have felt like in the Warhol days, like very underground. And so those parts were really fun. I think, having so much crypto influence was definitely for me. I think it was a lot of a distraction because being so in the art world and really looking at like what art is going to stand the test of time, I think that conversation is just now really getting its rightful place. So we haven't had enough of that kind of conversation. But I do love the artists that have just like really risen to the top and have like really focused on their discipline. I mean, that's what I talk to artists a lot is, it's really dialing in and there's hasn't been I think there's still an opportunity to see the next evolution of people's work, like when we really have major demand within the public spaces, which we're lining up huge volume. I mean, we have locations and enterprises that have 100 locations globally. So once we have that, then we have real volume. And I think it's going to really inspire the artist to reinvent the work and continue growing the discipline.
I mean, you
Right.
can this this period is going to be so interesting because you have every artist is going to be forced to reinvent the work with
Yep.
new technology coming all the time, whether it's AI or zero knowledge or the sort.
Yep. I'm excited to almost kind of create, I go back so much. My Art Republic was very much inspired by Plato's The Republic. Like, what does it take for a community to actually thrive? And I'm very inspired by philosophy. And we've seen these amazing ages of enlightenment that were driven by artists, but artists that were given a mission on what to create and what virtues and values to amplify through their work. So I'm really excited to be able to build a collective and have those conversations with our artists who are part of Art Republic and looking at what are we collectively trying to do and to accomplish and see how the work evolves with that.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and maybe that's the new gallery model.
Yep.
It's maybe it's not even like to be called a gallery, but maybe this is
Right.
the
It's an outdoor, like open air
shared
public. Yep.
experience, healing dimensions potentially as well.
Yep.
It's
It's amazing. So we look at it as like almost a three product ecosystem. So the digital signage, which every company and we see digital signage within advertising everywhere. And so either integrating digital art moments into that. So say for instance we work with Heinz, an amazing developer. They have 13 properties in New York that we integrate digital art alongside their internal messaging. So every day when people walk in, they see a display right at the entrance and there's artworks there. And it's amazing because it becomes this gallery experience, but all 13 locations get to have it together. And so we share information about the artist that gets distributed to the tenants. So the digital signage piece, obviously dedicated installations, are what we always hope for. And then an immersive wellness room. And those I'm really excited about because when you look at what a corporate wellness room is right now, it's often very sad. It's like
uh,
it's like a little closet, like a chair and a light. It's like, who wants to sit in there?
or to meditate, or that's
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, okay.
And so I've been, helping them to understand that these immersive rooms, can really not only offer moments of respite, but also a lot of emotional intelligence, which is the number one skill set of the future. When AI is able to compute, all this massive amounts of data, who's going to be able to have the insight to say what's valuable? How do you curate it? How do you figure out what the reasonings are from it? So having really emotionally intelligent intuitive workforce is going to be a huge need. And, being able to have these artistic moments daily will be the path to that.
Great. I had an idea when people will be very angry with me, but
Mhm.
we can even imagine like you could have like a pay-per-view
Yep.
model for artists, which I don't think I would like that. But still, I mean, it opens up quite a lot of different ways to look at how digital art is enjoyed, uh, paid for, or leased, or shared, or
Mhm.
yeah. I'm excited to see the future. I have no idea how it's going to evolve in a way, but
Mhm.
thanks to new actors like you and the new tools you mm, create to have these new experiences, it's definitely opening something new instead
Yeah.
of trying to replicate. a model which we all know and we try to make it digital or
Yep.
so
Yeah,
it's
I mean, I think,
interesting.
the beauty of digital art is that we can change it and evolve the experience instantly. I mean, the fact that, I can change what a lobby looks like every month or, these immersive rooms that we can have, 10 different experiences that people can go in and sit with, and those can be updated every month or every quarter. It's going to offer artists a massive amount of opportunity. We're gonna start needing a lot more work. We just launched the platform officially, so we'll be onboarding artists throughout this week, and, as we get new projects, we're trying to onboard artists. Olinda Dunia, just did the New York headquarters, the New York corporate space, as well as, U Health Hospital, so it's exciting.
Great. So
Yeah.
people can create their profile. I think they
Mhm.
can go to your website
Yep.
and start filling in a profile and starting the conversation.
Yep.
Pretty much that. Great. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.